Hello everyone, welcome to Kalam's answer writing session for the day. I'm sorry for the inconvenience caused over the past 1 week. I was busy taking classes for the economics rapid revision, so I did not really find time to make videos for Kalam's answer writing. Now that I have time, I want to come back and continue this project and make sure that this project continues without any hindrance. So today's question is on polity and local governance. If you all can recall, we have already done some questions on finances of local governments and how they function and so on. So this is just one of those questions where you talk about the finances. But what is peculiar or what is special about this question is the fact that it has been asked in the previous year question paper. So before I read out the question for you all, I want to basically tell you all the prerequisites that are required when you handle a polity based question, a hardcore polity based question. So the first thing to keep in mind is the usage of articles in relation to panchayat system. You can always talk about the articles 243, 243G, 243T and so on. In addition to this, you can mention certain constitutional amendments, like 73rd constitutional amendment is relevant for panchayati raj system, and 74th constitutional amendment is relevant for municipal corporations and so on. So these things can be put in your answer. In addition to this, several committees, especially the second ARC and the Punchi Commission, have given out several recommendations for the better functioning of these panchayats. These points can also be put in. In addition to this, various committee reports regarding the infrastructure of Panchayati Raj institution, or how well they are performing or how badly they are performing and so on. So these things can always be put in your answer. So that should be a brief explanation of what your prerequisites have to be. Now we'll move forward and evolve the usual introduction, body and conclusion format. But before I do that, I want to read out the question for you all. So the question is the following: assess the importance of panchayat system in India as a part of local government. That's the first part. Apart from government grants, what sources the panchayats can look out for financing developmental projects? So there are a couple of themes in this question. Broadly, there are two themes. First is to identify the importance of panchayat system for local government. What are the important points in relation to the importance of panchayati raj system? Like it is a tool of democratic decentralization, grassroots democracy, and so on. All these things can be put in. That is going to be my first side heading. In addition to this, I'm going to talk about the sources of finance, the sources of finance of the panchayats, and then I'll probably move forward and talk about the way forward and tell them how to improve the finances of the local governments, because we all know that the local governments are not doing really well, partly because of the restricted amount of taxation powers they have. In addition to this, whatever taxation powers they have, they don't really exercise because of fear of popular backlash. Like if they want to increase their taxes, there would be backlash from the people at the local level, so they don't really levy those taxes. So, and in addition to this, the state governments are not willing to devolve funds. So these are the problems that are there. So what is the way forward? So this is going to be the broad themes of my body of my answer. How do I introduce my answer? I introduce my answer by talking about Panchayati Raj system and how it is a tool of democratic decentralization, and it has come under what? 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act. Then I move to the body of my answer. First, I talk about the importance of panchayat system. I give about 5 to 6 points. Next, I move forward and talk about the sources of panchayat finance. Before I talk about the other sources of panchayat finance, which the question has asked, how about I talk about the government finances? What are the government grants that are there? One, the state government gives its grants. That is the first point. And secondly, in recent times, the 14th Finance Commission itself has given direct grants to the panchayats. Okay, panchayats without going through the mechanism of state government. So it gave out some component to the panchayats directly. That is another grant. In addition to that, what are the other sources of finance, which are basically from the government route? And once I talk about this briefly, be it in a diagram or in a small side heading, I can move forward and clearly tell them that there are so and so other sources of finance, and we have to improve them for the better functioning of developmental projects and so on. And conclusion should be neither too vague nor too specific. So having said that, this should be my introduction, body and conclusion format. I'll move forward and see how this person has written his answer. So the first point he has written is that PRIs were set up under 73rd Constitutional Amendment as a tool of democratic decentralization. Good, but he should have mentioned Panchayati Raj institutions as such, because this is the first time he's talking about Panchayati Raj institution. Initially, you have to mention the whole name, then you can use the acronyms of PRI, ULB, and so on. Now, the importance of PRI as a part of local governments. First, grassroots democracy. Two, it empowers the local citizenry. It also provides them with the opportunity to formulate policies. Like if you see the Niti Aayog report or the previous planning commission envisaged role of PRIs, there used to be village development plans, etc., etc. These would be created by people at the grassroots, by the people at the grassroots. Now these would be integrated successively upwards and upwards. That is basically the model that is envisaged. So it helps them to formulate policies. PRI is one such tool. PRI is the main tool. Better implementation of rural development programs. Like for example, if you give them more funds and if you give them more responsibilities and powers, they can implement the schemes really well, especially when you have a mechanism like social audit and so on. In addition to this, there is it also leads to a third tier of federalism. Federalism, when it spreads itself over different tiers, it is going to lead to a decentralization of power, which is a good thing. And then it also helps in inclusive growth, especially because in PRIs, in these village level communities, there are many marginalized people like the SCs, STs or the tribals and so on. So these people can have more benefit if we give PRIs more funds. In addition to this, you can empower the rural masses. So some of the points in these 6 points are really good, but some of them seem to be a repetition. But overall, he addressed this well. Now he moves forward and talks about the problems in finances. He talks about the problems in finances of the rural government. We thought previously that we would talk about the government grants, but now he's talking about the problems. So this is probably a way to add value to your answer, because you don't have really much points when you really talk about the other sources of finance. There are only 3 or 4 points, but you have space left, so you have to squeeze in these kind of side headings. So the first problem is poor devolution of grants from the state governments. We all know why, because the state governments do not want to give away their powers. In addition to this, finance commission grants as per 14th commission are not sufficient. You have to mention that they are not sufficient karke, you have to mention that. And then as you move forward, you also talk about the poor tax base that is there, and whatever poor tax base that is there, they are not properly utilized by these people. Let's move forward. Now he's talking about the sources of finance other than ground grants. First, they can impose taxes. They can impose taxes like toll tax, license fee, etc. And in some areas, entry tax or whatever is there, that local taxes are there. But a good number of them have been subsumed under GST these days. So it's really difficult for them to levy taxes or get more money out of these things. Next, development financing by World Bank. World Bank basically gives out development financing, especially to tribal areas or totally downtrodden areas. So that is one way where these people get their money from. In addition to this, the state and the central government provides funds through various schemes, like you have MPLADS and so on. When you have this scheme is basically financed by the funds from the central government to an extent. So that is another source of finance. So in addition to this, NGOs, private donors and so on, they also take up this activity called joint funding in order to implement the schemes. So these are the points that are there. You don't have too many points under this. Like for example, if you have a question on inclusive growth, you can write whatever you want. But when this is basically a fact-based question, there is only so much you can write, as in so little you can write. And this is the area where you have to show in your creativity. Like he started talking about the problems in finances of local governments. Now he's talking about the way forward. The first way forward is to use the principle of subsidiarity. I want you all to go back and look at what it is and write it down in the comment section. Principle of subsidiarity is to say that you have to give more powers to local governments, or to that level of governments where the work can be done. You don't have to coalesce your responsibility and power at upper levels of the government. You can give it to the lower levels like local governments and so on, because that is where the job can get done. In addition to this, you are supposed to have a dedicated cadre of PRI. I don't think this is really relevant in this question, which talks more about the finances that are involved. And then the local level GST can be mooted. So that is basically a bouncer point you see here and there by people in editorials, local level GST and so on. While it has economic complications, it has been mooted. It has been mooted, so we are writing it in this answer. In addition to this, widening the powers of local government is important for effective functioning. Okay, so far so generic. Now he moves forward and says you have to follow the second ARC recommendations of financial reforms can be considered. So overall, the answer is decent answer, not really good answer, because in the way forward he could have written about a lot of other things in order to improve the finances of the local governments. And even in the first part where he was supposed to talk about the importance of local government, he could have given examples from ancient India. He could have given examples from the world over where local government functioning has helped the economy grow to a large extent. That was one thing that he missed out. And in addition to this, he talked less about finances. He talked more about the political issues that are involved. He shouldn't have done that. थोड़ा बहुत चलता है but not so much. So that should be the short discussion for the day. I'll keep coming up with questions from tomorrow and day after tomorrow and so on. It's nice to be back and share knowledge and answers and whatever. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.